Who are the most impactful players on the Bucs if they're going to succeed in 2025? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP edition of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at EKlosky We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you at least 3 days a week for the month of June. Of course, Evan is on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app. And want to shout out the everydayers and thank you for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. And if you were an insider, you would have helped make this show happen because we have an Insider Evan Klosky mailbag episode. You got to love that.
That's why you talk with James.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, normally I don't advise that, but in certain situations it does make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Evan texted me and he said, you know what, James? I need insider mailbag questions for our recording this week. I said, fam, I got you. So we are going to be talking about trade scenarios, personal experiences, and a lot more coming up in a little bit. But we're going to start this one off with a question from Insider Mike. And he says, okay, Evan, no low-hanging fruit allowed here. So you cannot say Baker, Levante, Mike, or Vita. Name the most impactful player on offense, the most impactful player on defense. And yes, if you think it's a rookie, that is the answer I want. And should we be worried about our special teams unit, or do you think the team did enough to button up that issue? Now, Evan, I'm going to expand this just a little bit. So Mike said no Baker, no Evans on offense. I'm also going to include Tristan Wirfs. So who needs to be the most impactful player on offense if the Bucs are going to make a run at the Super Bowl?
So offense will start there. And I think I'm going to go Jalen McMillan, by the way.
Ooh.
Yeah, because here's the thing. We know what we're going to get out of Mike. Hopefully we know what we're going to get out of Chris Godwin. I think it would be a cop-out if I said Chris Godwin as well, But let's say that Mike and Chris are exactly what we thought they would be midway through the season. I don't think Chris is going to be what we think he was. He'll be eased into action, at least snap count wise, and then more will be put on his plate, and then we can see really how Chris has progressed from that injury last season. But here's why I say Jalen. He is an X factor as what could potentially be the third or fourth receiver on this team. I like Ibuka a lot. I don't know if he necessarily is going to be that kind of guy since he will be kind of rotating with Chris Godwin. So I'm a little, again, love him. I'm a little afraid to say that it hinges on him considering his snap count might look a little bit different when Chris Godwin comes back. So I kind of view them maybe as one of the same until I see Ibuka kind of show out wide. But when we talk about Mike, Chris, Cade Otton, some of these receiving options, even Bucky Irving coming out of the backfield, Rachaad White, is Jalen that much of a mismatch when we get to his part of the stem? So it's like hockey, right? The top couple of lines on the playoff teams typically are all really good. But why are the Florida Panthers, why are the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup final? That's because their third and fourth lines are really good. And when you talk about the Panthers, that third line is incredible. And their third line against your third line is going to be a brutal matchup for you. So that's kind of where I see Jalen McMillan is if he can kind of be that guy that we saw at the end of last season and he be potentially wide receiver 4 on this team, to me, that would be the difference maker in this group. And I think it's much easier to answer this question defensively than offensively, because offensively everyone's returning, so we already kind of know how everyone works. I'm also so high on Ibuka that I know that the floor is going to be very good for him. I'm just unsure of his ceiling because I'm unsure of his role. And that answer can change as we get into training camp. But for right now, just looking at it, Jalen McMillan he's in kind of this area of like, are you going to be super special or are you going to be complimentary? And if he's super special, I don't know what you do against these guys. I really don't. So to me, that's where I got Jalen McMillan.
See, and I fully expected you to go Bucky Irving there. I really, truly did. I was like, I don't think he's going to go Ibuka, even though I know you're real high on Ibuka. Ibuka is to Evan what Morrison is to me. That's kind of how this shakes out. But yeah, I thought for sure you were going to say Bucky. So I love the answer.
Bucky certainly is really important. But again, I just feel like there may be with a running attack in this offensive line, if Bucky were to go down, I still think Sean Tucker, who we haven't seen take a larger role, I think Sean Tucker in the Bucky role and Rashad still as that third stringer, I still think that you can have a pretty capable offense. I don't think you're going to lose a step. Is Bucky the best running back on the team? Absolutely. But I still think you can probably survive and advance. But I think that McMillan would be the X factor, because if he is as special as many think he is, like, it's just embarrassing how deep this team goes at that position now that you added Ibuka.
Yeah, somebody needs to tell that to PFF. I'll talk about their receiver rankings on tomorrow's episode. But Evan, defensively, he said no Levante or Vita, but I'm also going to add in no Hassan Reddick.
Oh, come on.
Way too easy. So which defensive player needs to be the most impactful if they're going to make a run without talking about Levante Vita and Hassan?
Let the record show that Hassan Reddick is the key to everything. Look, if I think Antoine Winfield Jr. has to stay healthy, right? Like, he went from maybe one of the greatest seasons we've seen from a safety 2 years ago to really being a shell of himself last year, because he was outside of 3 quarters pretty much injured the rest of the season. So Antoine Winfield Jr. is kind of the stock answer. Again, I want to look for X factors, because typically if Antoine is healthy, I know what we're going to get out of him. He's going to be special. So really, Servase Dennis could be in this conversation as well, but I'm going to go with Tyke Smith.
Oh, I love it.
He's going to move into a full-time safety role. That job has been rotated in and out for the past few years now. They haven't really found that person next to Antoine since Jordan Whitehead was there the first time. They tried to recapture that magic. Didn't quite happen. So it really has been a hole ever since Jordan Whitehead first left for the Jets. And is Tyke going to be that answer? So to me, he's entering a job where we think that he is excellent. I certainly think he's excellent. We haven't seen him play all the snaps before. We haven't really seen him play this position in particular for an entire game. So to me, Tyke stepping into that role, and if he can be a perfect foil to Antoine Winfield Jr., I think you finally have something cooking there. But defensively, man, I mean, we can go in so many ways with this answer. I mean, Yaya Diaby, I think, is super important now that you have Hassan Reddick. Like, is he going to now complete some of these sacks that now some of that pressure has been alleviated from his load? Is Kalijah Kancey going to play every game? We know how special he can be when he's out on the field. They have the makings of a really darn good defense. We just need to see them healthy, and that there's a lot of what ifs with a lot of these players, including Jamel Dean, which I think you can pretty much write off for missing at least 4 games of this season, right? So that's typically how it goes. But if you're going to eliminate those guys, I think 1, Antoine Winfield Jr., and then 2, I am very curious about Tyke, and then Servase Dennis is certainly another name that's high on my my board. And as I've mentioned on here in the past, Servassier Dennis might be number one of players I'm watching when we hit training camp.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we are talking an undrafted rookie and a trade. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, for me, it's youth sports. It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, all your investments, all your spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. All right, Insider JJ sent in a double shot. So we're going to start with the guy on the team that JJ asked about, and he said, does Desmond Watson get into a position to make the 53-man roster, or is he a practice squad player? What kind of impact can he have if he makes the 53?
So answering that question first, because I know there's another one. I don't know if Desmond Watson is going to make the initial 53. I am a little bit concerned. Let's say that he has a really good camp and has some really good preseason games. There might be a concern that he would be plucked by another team and inserted onto their 53-man roster. So I do put an asterisk because we have to see what he is. But as of right now, last year they took 6 defensive linemen. And so this year you have Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, Logan Hall, Greg Gaines. At that point, you then also have Elijah Roberts, who we think is going to make the roster. That leaves one more spot if we carbon copy what they did last year. And you have guys like CJ Brewer, Mike Green. So people who have experience with the team. And I don't know if Desmond can play special teams quite yet. So I'm not saying it's a for sure no. I can totally see a way that he becomes that last guy on the 53-man. But I really need to see him in action to fully answer that question. And in T-shirts and shorts, I can't let you know. But he, as far as top 5 guys I'm watching, right, I mentioned Servassier. Big Dez is going to be one of them. I will say, because of that fear of getting poached by another team, I do believe the Buccaneers are going to give him every chance possible to make the roster and develop some sort of limited game plan for him, certainly on push downs or, 4th and 1s, something along that route where they can insert him into the game with Vita. That's what I want to see. I want to see those packages in camp, and then I can answer that question a little bit better. But right now I'm like 50-50.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that I kind of have circled to keep an eye out during training camp. And yeah, you brought up a point that I think a lot of listeners are going to overlook, and that is the fact that, yeah, you can pluck guys off of other practice squads if they are part of your 53-man roster in your active roster. So that is something to be concerned about. It's also something to keep an eye out for when it comes to the wide receivers. But that's a discussion for later on, because
that's a battle.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited for that battle. But all right, JJ also wants you to play Jason Light. And he says, Evan, with over the cap saying we have $26 million in cap space, what do you think it takes to bring Trey Hendrickson in? Now, there was a report for those that didn't see it. Maybe not a report, more of a story that Jason Light made a run at Max Crosby when John Spytek became the GM of the Raiders. Now, Spytek said that Jason told him that a 5th-round pick for Crosby sounded fair considering everything Jason had done for John throughout his career. Obviously very tongue-in-cheek and ha-ha, but it sounds like there's some dialogue now between the Bengals and Hendrickson. So do you think the Bucs could still make a blockbuster trade and land him, or do you think pretty much the Hendrickson trade ship has kind of sailed at this stage of the NFL year?
I think it sailed when they signed Hassan Reddick because let's say Hendrickson and Cincinnati don't come to terms. Well, is Hendrickson just going to sit out the year? Because why would I give up draft assets if I can just acquire him next year when Hassan Reddick is on a 1-year deal, right? I did like that move before Reddick signed, but I don't see a path to where they're going to bring in Hendrickson unless in training camp Yaya or Hassan go down and there's like like who's that other piece over there? And maybe you expand and circle back, but I don't foresee them. If they would have done that, I think that would have probably happened already before Reddick was signed. So I'm going to say no on that front.
All right. Well, and then before we get to kind of the Evan deep dive portion of this mailbag, I do want to circle back to Mike, who opened up our show, because he did ask you something that I did not follow up on, but he had asked about special teams. So is the special teams unit now something that you're comfortable with the changes that they've made, or should Bucs fans be a little concerned about special teams? Obviously, there was the punter issues last year. Illinois legend Chase McLaughlin is not going to let anybody down, but you're seeing a shift in the return game potentially with the addition of Tez Johnson. So how do you feel about special teams for the Bucs right now?
Yeah, I'm all right with that right now. I want to see how the coverage looks, because like a guy like Devin Culp is likely going to have to play on special teams or something like that. You know, you're going to have to bring in, like, is Josh Hayes going to take up a cornerback spot because he's still got to play special teams? So I need to see how the coverages are still going to be lined up when we get to training camp. But bringing in Dixon certainly helps because the punting game was an atrocity last year. And he's a veteran. I don't envision there's going to be a crazy drop off. You know, maybe at worst he's a league average punter, but I don't envision it being as bad as what we saw last year. So to me, you have Chase, who is not talked about enough, but is arguably one of the best kickers in the league right now. You have Dixon, who you brought in a veteran punter, where I think you've raised your floor immensely at that position. You brought in Tez Johnson, who, at least from a punt returning perspective, should be an upgrade. And then it comes down to what that kick returning unit's going to look like. And there have been a lot of people moving in and out to see who fits there. So we're going to see. But at this point, I do believe special teams looks better now than what it did last year.
All right. Well, the insiders get a little personal. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP edition of Locked On Bucs. It is the Evan Klosky Insider Mailbag episode, and they got a little personal, Evan, in the questions. Not too personal, but Insider Tom kicks this off by asking,
you're going to ask me personal questions, and then the lights shut off of me.
Of course, again, back-to-back weeks. Someone in the YouTube comments said when that happened last week that you weren't listening to anything that I was saying and not paying attention to what was going on. But,
I'm not going to confirm nor deny that.
I came to your defense. I was like, he was listening, but he's doing this in his office. There's other stuff going on, like people randomly turning the lights out on him when he's in the middle of a show. But we could pause for a moment.
There are a lot of distractions here.
I was going to say we could pause for a moment and allow you to fix the light situation if you'd like, or we could power through it.
It's like changing a tire in NASCAR.
I'm going to leave that entire thing into you getting up and running. It's all staying in the show. But no, Insider Tom asks, what's been the most surprising thing that you have seen or experienced since you came to Tampa and started covering the Bucs?
Seen or experience, like, what do we mean by surprising? Like on the field, or just like behind the scenes, or like?
I guess that's open to your interpretation.
Okay,
I would say,
I think because to me it would be the Antonio Brown situation, running off the field shirtless, MetLife Stadium, and that was on a Sunday. And I remember watching the game from home, and the next thing I know, it comes back from break, I believe, and Antonio Brown, like, he just ran off the field, and I like, my boss and I text each other at the same point. It's like, I was like, I'm coming in, and she's like, you're gonna have to come in. I was like, we're on the same page here. I'm already booting up, and yeah, and I had to put together a whole timeline of the saga. And Bruce, has that, it's like a Zoom being like, yeah, he's off the team. And that was kind of, you always wonder what if with that Buccaneers squad, if Antonio Brown was on the 2021 group that was built for
Super Bowl.
I mean, they were a juggernaut. And I mean, they laid a big fat egg in the first half against the Rams. That game was certainly one of the craziest games I've been at as a since I've came to town, cover the Buccaneers. That was just a wild experience. Certainly, the Brady comeback against the Saints was also another wild one. But yeah, I think the Antonio Brown saga and maybe Bruce Arians retiring were probably the two most shocking developments that I couldn't quite plan for. The Bruce Arians thing, I believe, happened on a Tuesday. I was doing a fantasy baseball draft and in the office, and I'm on the phone with my buddy. We share a team, and he's just like, the automatic updates come on Twitter, and he was just like, yeah, I think you're going to have to go now. And I was like, what? He's like, you might want to look at your Twitter. And I was like, what the? Hung up on him and just immediately, started doing work. So, I think those are the top two that come to mind as far as like shocking stuff I can't prepare for.
All right.
Then there's the whole Brady retiring, unretiring. There's a lot of good times here, but those were the first two of like what the hell moments. I would say those were two, and Brady unretiring maybe three.
All right. Well, Insider Ethan says, hey, James, I want to know how Evan's trip to Australia was. I could ask him on X, but I love to hear my questions answered on the show. So Ethan just wants survival tips on how you navigated all the creatures that were out to destroy you.
James not a big fan of Australia, is what I learned.
It's beautiful. It just scares me.
Oh my God. Don't worry about it. Regardless of what James's feelings are on Australia, I absolutely loved it. First and foremost, the currency exchange is fantastic. So you are getting an unbelievable deal once you get over there. The flight to get over there is going to cost you a good chunk of change. But once you get over there, you're getting like a 40% discount on everything. I mean, you can stay at like the Four Seasons there for $200, which typically, in the States, go look up what a Four Seasons costs. So that's just a comp. Like, you're going to be treated really well in Sydney. Sydney reminded me a lot of like Seattle, kind of gave me Pacific Northwesty vibes. If you ever been to Seattle, how it's kind of built on a hill and right by the water, like, could not say enough good things about Sydney. It's absolutely gorgeous. The weather when we went was gorgeous. The bridge climb was maybe the the second best thing we did in that entire trip. Was so cool. And there's like, it is impossible to jump off that thing when you're doing the bridge climb. Like you can't even accidentally fall off. You are locked into that thing. So safety is, was of the utmost importance. And then Uluru, going to the Outback, certainly for us and my wife, I think going to be a once in a lifetime sort of deal. The best dinner I've ever had, and I'm a foodie. Best dinner I've ever had was in Uluru. Under the stars. I felt like royalty at this place. It was like the coolest I've ever felt, and certainly not built like that. And then Cairns was doing the Great Barrier Reef, the scuba dive. You can do an intro dive. We did 2 of them where you don't have to be certified, and that was spectacular. We stayed in Palm Cove. If anyone's going to Australia, I think that's the way to do it. If you're going to do Cairns and do the Great Barrier Reef, you stay in Palm Cove. That puts you in the middle of Port Douglas and Cairns. And in my opinion, I loved Port Douglas. That's where we did the Great Barrier Reef, and that was a beautiful area. So cannot say enough good things about that trip. I'm still so sad and look back at some of these photos like I can't believe that we did that. But yeah, I highly suggest it for anyone who's capable and has the ability to do it. My wife and I saved up a good chunk of change to make sure that we could have that honeymoon for a couple of years. And so that was certainly a life, maybe a once in a lifetime sort of trip. Hopefully it's not, but yeah, I wish we could have done more. I wish we could have done Melbourne. I wish we could have done the Irwin Zoo, I think in kind of the Gold Coast area. But man, I was like in awe of that place. And it does feel like you can go over there and it feels pretty American, like outside of seeing a bunch of rugby on TV instead of like football or baseball. And not to mention waking up at 7 a.m. and realizing baseball games were starting at that point. Other than that, you can really just go over there and you're not going to have to there's no language barriers. There's no nothing. Like it's just, I mean, you go over there and you feel like you're just in another kind of American city. And if you go to Sydney, you want to make sure that if you go to the Opera House and you do a tour, make sure you go to the Opera Bar right outside of the Opera House. It's lined up, outdoor drinks, right on the water, great vibes, and it's right there by the port where boats come in and stuff. So, and certainly if anybody is going there, like hit me up on X, please. I have great recommendations, especially food wise. I can build a whole trip for you. So certainly can talk about this for a lot of time, but those were the highlights. Loved it.
Well, 10-year anniversary. You can hit all those spots that you missed the first time. You got plenty of time to save up and do it big all over again. Just throwing that out there. Throwing it out there.
Yeah, and don't worry about the insects and the bugs. Don't listen to James.
I'll forever worry about those. I've seen those.
Yeah.
All right. Evan, what do we have going on over on 10 Tampa Bay? 10tampabay.com and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app. Outside of Rays fans laughing at the Red Sox ruining a lot of people's Father's Day by trading Rafael Devers.
Look, the Rays are hot. And we're going to continue talking about them. They've been a fun team to watch. 10 Tampa Bay Plus, we got the Ultimate Florida Sports Show with my friend Chris Porter. This week, we actually got Ashley Gonzalez. Chris is off this week. So, we're talking about NBA trades. We'll talk about Bucs, Jags, and Finns, wrapping up kind of our thoughts on mandatory minicamp, what we're looking for entering training camp. We talk a little bit about Devers, the U.S. Open, and how hard the course is and if that's a good thing. So we kind of debate, again, it's a lot of Florida sports. We cover the entire state, but we also talk about some big things that's happening nationally as well. So check that out, 10 Tampa Bay Plus at your own time. And then 10tampabay.com as always. And you can find me at 6 and 11 o'clock on 10 Tampa Bay. And also you can find the Sportscast on 10 Tampa Bay Plus as well.
All right, coming up tomorrow, I will tell PFF why they're wrong about their receiver rankings, and I'm going to call out some Eagles people who are already taking shots at the Bucs because they're jealous and they hate the Bucs and they can't beat the Bucs. And so there's some animosity there. That's all coming up tomorrow. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, at eCloskey, WTSP. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you have those notifications turned on so you know every time a show drops. And, of course, you can become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.